Hey everyone, welcome back to the Hello Warrior podcast. My name is Denis.
My name is Kristin.
And we are your hosts for this episode on admissions. And we're here with André. André, you want to introduce yourself?
I'm André Jardin. I'm the Associate Registrar of Admissions, which just means I make sure that we do admissions well and fairly across the University of Waterloo.
Sweet. And then just a little intro about myself. My name is Denis. I'm a recent graduate from the University of Waterloo, where I graduated from biomedical sciences. So I have my BSc, and now I am an undergraduate recruitment specialist working for the University of Waterloo.
My name is Kristin. I'm, as I said before, a less recent graduate to Denis, but I'm a national marketing and recruitment specialist. And I really just like chatting with high school students and parents and supporters. So we're happy to be here and talk through probably the most hottest topic ever requested.
Admissions.
Yes.
André, you ready to get grilled?
I'm ready.
There we go. We'll start with a pretty spicy one. So, do you need a 99.5% average to get into Waterloo?
Contrary to popular belief, you do not. Most of our programs actually start in around the 80 average range and up from there. So it really depends on the level of interest year to year in different programs. So some programs cut off around 80. And yes, there are programs though where it's possible to not get in with a 99.5, but that's because we're looking at a lot of students in a narrow range in the high 90s, and we're scoring other things.
Right. And which of those programs would be, say, the most competitive that we would have at Waterloo?
So that would definitely be computer science and software engineering.
Gotcha. Sorry, where are you going to go?
No, I was just going to say in that vein, do you mind just describing to us how you would make an admissions average for a student?
Yeah, so in the case of software engineering and computer science, you of course do calculate an average like all programs. We use your best 6 U or M level courses if you're in Ontario. If you're outside of Ontario, it's the equivalent courses. And so we create an average, and that is the main part of your admission score. And then we ask you to fill out a supplementary form called an admission information form. So you answer a series of questions, just short answer, authentic answers. We score those, and that score gets added to your average. And in software engineering, you also have a choice to do a optional video interview where you answer a couple of additional questions, so you can get a bonus for that. And in computer science, you can indicate if you've done really well in some of the math or computer science competitions. But basically, it's your average and 1 or 2 other components to make a total admission score, and that's where we draw the line.
Gotcha. And then just on that note, when do admissions decisions kind of get made for, let's say, engineering, math, and then maybe some of the other faculties that we have?
Yeah, so we start making our first round of offers in December.
Okay.
So we need time for students to apply, usually towards the end of September, early October. And then we have to collect your documents. If you're in Ontario, your grades actually come directly from your school electronically. So we make a small number in December. Really, again, a lot of students are just getting started, and it is a mixture of grade 11s and 12s. And then in the new year, we have 3 big rounds. And those rounds are typically based on when you have midterm grades coming in, because most students are in a term or semester system. So you have that midterm point and the end of term point. And that's when we get a big download of grades or upload of grades, and we make decisions. And that's true at Waterloo and across all the universities. Math and engineering are actually getting ready to do their first round of offers in the next couple weeks. So this is timely. And the reason that they start a little bit later is not because they just want to take their time.
Yeah.
It's that they have a lot of applications to look at, anywhere from 13 to 15,000 in total for each of those faculties.
Yeah.
So not only are they collecting grades, but they're also looking at those supplementary forms. So they have to read those, they have to score them. Mm-hmm. So in order to make the fairest decision possible for the student and for us, we want to make sure we've looked at most students before we start making the decisions.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you mind just, because one question I find I get on the road a lot is there's a big panic about grade 11 grades and the importance, and like, what if my English 11 grade isn't that strong, but English 12 is in second semester, English 4U. Do you mind talking just a little bit about that?
So technically our requirement is on grade 12 average.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're doing our final round, which is the end of April into early May, we have at least a midterm grade for every grade 12 course.
Right.
So in that sense, if you weren't admitted earlier on and you're in the final round, we'll have a grade 12 average for you. So we're really focusing on that predominantly. But early on, if you have really strong grade 11 grades mixed with a few of your grade 12 grades, so you're well above where we expect the minimum to be, That's where we do earlier offers. So it doesn't necessarily mean that a student is the best student if they get an earlier offer. It could be that you're just not taking the courses we need. For example, you might not be taking any math till your final term or semester, so we might wait a little bit. But it's not first come, first served is the good news.
Yes.
So really we're assessing everybody who's applied. But if you're well above, then you might get an early offer based on grade 11s and 12 mixed together. All students who get an offer, though, have the same admissions conditions. So you still have to meet the same basic final grades in order to guarantee your spot.
Right. If you're taking AP courses or if you're in an IB program, are you given some advantage when it comes to the admissions process, or is everyone sort of on the same or equal playing field?
Yeah, I can say that I've been doing this almost 20 years, and we do research consistently, and faculties will look at their admission requirements every so often, every few years. And what we've seen is if you're admitted, you have an equal chance of being successful. So our team works really hard to stay up to date on curriculum changes and to make sure that we're comparing all students across the country and internationally in an equitable way. That being said, if you're taking AP or IB, and there's other systems in the world that are actually more advanced, it's possible to get transfer credits. Now you have to have a top grade in order to be eligible for that, but we still use your grade as a grade for admission. And again, our research indicates that that's an appropriate behavior or decision to do. In Ontario, actually, IB grades are reported as Ontario course grades. But outside of Ontario, we get them on a 1 to 7 scale. So again, in admissions departments, whether you're in a 1 to 7 scale, a percentage scale, an ABC, a letter grade system, we always convert that into an equivalent average to make sure that everybody's getting a fair assessment.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think you always say it best when that the academic rigor, it's not negating that. That's a great preparation for university still. It's just coming as a transfer credit, which is a way it's acknowledged. But all those skills you learn in IB, that's great.
Yeah, AP and IB students do really well in university. However, again, if you're at a small, let's say rural school where you don't have access to APs or IBs,
Absolutely.
Again, every indication is that if you're admitted, you can do just as well in university. Because our curriculum is actually designed as a continuation of the grade 12 public curriculum.
Exactly. Going a little bit backwards to the admissions information form, especially for the two faculties of engineering and math, the biggest question we get on the road is like, okay, well, what do I write? And I think it's hard for students, especially when you're in that mindset, because you want the formula that's going to get you in. But do you mind speaking just a bit to what we're looking to get from that form?
Yeah, and actually, ironically, the admission information form is publicly available, so the questions are already known. Now, that being said, we're working on reviewing our supplementary form, so I suspect that if you're not an applicant right now, next year it'll be different. But essentially, there's no lack of transparency. We tell you what the questions are. What we don't give away is the rubric. Right? If we told you exactly how to answer, it'd be the same as giving you the answers to the test, and everybody would give the same answer to maximize their score. So quite honestly, we just want students to give an authentic answer. If we're asking about extracurricular activities or time outside of school, because there's one of the misconceptions that we're only looking at sports or clubs.
Exactly.
And the reality is that we have students that are doing so many things outside of the classroom. And that's what we're really trying to get at. It could be volunteer work. It could be elder or childcare. It could be working part-time. How many hours are you doing? How in depth? Some students are doing a lot of activities, but in smaller increments. It's just sharing what it is that you do outside of the classroom. And of course, we're looking for how students handle those other responsibilities if they're doing other things. Most students are pretty similar, is the reality. But it also helps us find the outliers. And again, we want to make sure we're finding balance between the student, for example, that has an 86 average and all of these great things that they're doing outside the classroom, and a student that maybe has a slightly higher average, but really isn't involved in very much.
Right.
All the indications are that both are good students, but if you've built up those other soft skills, if you want to call them that, it's going to set you up for success in university.
Right.
Yeah, I find the key that I always think of that engineering Bill Bishop always talks about is what are the transferable skills? Because I think you're right. Students think if I'm applying to engineering, I need to be a part of the robotics club. Oh, my school doesn't have that. don't worry.
Yeah.
It's about, you could be a part of the chess club. It doesn't matter. It's what are the skills coming from that you might use at university.
And I think it's important to note that outside of math, engineering, and accounting and financial management has its own separate activities. There's a few programs like that, but most of our programs are actually just based on your minimum average.
Yes.
Right.
Meaning, even though we publish, say, low 80s, the reason we don't say 82 is because we don't know exactly where we're going to cut off until we see the applicant pool for this year.
Right.
But what we publish is what we expect you to need to have a really good shot at it based on previous years. But again, a lot of our programs, as long as you meet the minimum requirements with the correct courses, including required courses, then you'll get an offer based on that.
Yeah, students always ask me when I'm on the road, like, oh, I'm applying to comp sci or some kind of engineering program. What can I do on my AIF to like stand out? What can I do to make myself look as like a better applicant? And I always tell them, just be genuine, do the things that you're passionate about. And it's really not about what you're actually doing. It's about the skills and the development that you're making through those interactions, whether it's communication skills or leadership or time management skills that you're building. And those are all those transferable skills that really play a huge part when you get to university.
And I think you just nailed it. It's not just about getting an offer.
Right.
Really, the skills you're building are to help you as a student. That's why we do it, not just to draw a cutoff line. But if you've done the work on that, let's say you want to go into a co-op program. If you've worked at Tim Hortons or a startup, it doesn't really matter. What we're saying is building up some of that experience and building your resume is going to help you when you go to apply for that first co-op job, rather than just having, your academic average. You're going to have some relevant work experience. So again, the things that we look for in admission really are about getting yourself into the best place to be successful when you get to university.
Surviving, not just thriving. Or
reverse that.
It's
okay.
We're clipping that for sure.
Surviving,
not just surviving. There we go. Now, the one caveat to that is, let's say, software engineering. Could you talk a little bit about how the Software Engineering AIF may differ from other programs?
Yeah, there's really one main small difference from other engineering programs, and that is specifically they ask you about your programming experience. So we're not looking for a specific language, C++ or whatever the languages are now. I might be a little outdated on that. It's really that you have a foundation and maybe some demonstrated ability or experience in that area.
Right.
But beyond that, you have to have a competitive average. You have to have a top admission information form score. Really, if you're applying to some of our most competitive programs, it's not an exaggeration to say all the students are excellent. Exactly. That's not me just being complimentary. It's true. To be in the running, you have to be an incredible student. Right. And the hardest thing for students, and I say this genuinely, is that we try to admit as many students as possible, but we also have to say no to a lot of students. Yeah. And no doesn't mean that Waterloo or engineering or computer science doesn't think you're a good student or will be successful. It just means that using all the tools at our disposal, there were students in front of you in line based on their score. Right. And so, again, if you just miss getting in at Waterloo, I guarantee you're getting offers to other places. And we encourage you to take those offers, and we know you'll be successful. So that's the hardest part, I think, for a lot of really good students. This might be the first time that they didn't get in or didn't get a positive decision. They're used to being the top students in their school or even their region. But those are the students who are applying from across the country and even internationally. Yeah.
I think it's a concept, exactly like you're saying, where in reality, say for software engineering, you could admit 5 times the amount of students and still be turning away really qualified applicants. Yep. But the great news, and I think the misconception of Waterloo, is that that's across the board, when in reality, like you're mentioning, arts, environment, sciences, health, like there's some programs there where if you meet the average, very likely you get an offer.
Yeah, and they're excellent programs. I mean, I'm a faculty of arts grad myself. I know it's been a little while, but that's our largest faculty at the University of Waterloo. So it's not math, it's not engineering, it's the faculty of arts. And there's a wide range of things you can study. So we get a lot of students, like any comprehensive university, outside of those technical areas. The programs we have in math and engineering are world-class and have top ranking often. So they draw a lot of attention in that, rightfully. But those other areas, science, health, arts, environment, incredible areas. And you'll see a lot of math and engineering students also taking courses in those areas, because you don't just come and study one thing. Yeah. You might get your degree in one thing, but the university experience is about trying different things out.
Changing topics a little bit here. For students that are interested in applying to, let's say, engineering and math, what do you say about online, summer, private, or sort of night schooling? And then for non-eng or math students, is there the same effect there, or is it kind of similar?
Yeah, so really where you have policies around that are our most competitive areas, where we have to choose between students with basically the same averages is one of the easy examples. So unfortunately, we do have students that are always looking for the easy path, the shortcut. And we do have quite a few, let's call them diploma mills or questionable high schools in Ontario, where students can basically pay for the grade that they get. We're aware of these schools, we're aware that this happens. So some of our policies are really to ensure that students are taking the courses from a good school in the way that you would expect from students. That's what it's really about. So math, engineering, accounting, and financial management, those are some of our competitive areas. What they're really focusing on is if you're taking a course outside of your day school. And when I say that, it's not about the medium. So online versus in class is not our focus at all. You look at, especially since COVID, there's a lot more online offerings. So that's not our focus. But if you're not taking a course through your school, we just ask you why. And if there's a good reason for it, we'll move forward with the assessment in the normal way. Many students that we do see going outside, you can see that it's just to get a higher grade. And so you might see that they had, let's say, low 70s for the last 3 years. And then all of a sudden, when they take math outside their day school, at, let's say, a questionable school, perhaps, it's a miracle. They've got 98% all of a sudden.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, again, we want to be fair to the rest of the students that are applying. So that's where the focus is. It's more the why. If there's a good reason, as I said, and there's a multitude of reasons, because we're dealing with a lot of students, we're not going to apply a penalty in that sense. Outside of math, engineering, accounting, and financial management, so arts, environment, health, science, we don't have policies that look at repeated courses or courses taken outside of your day school. So your average is your average, based on your best attempt, let's say, at a course.
And I would say that's, again, another really common misconception is students hear the repeated course penalties or whatever, and it's blanketed across the entire university, when in reality it's like you said, it's those particular areas where it's really competitive. But for a lot of students, we would, for example, take, if you repeated a course because they didn't go well the first time, we would take the highest one for most of those. It's just those big faculties that have that competitive edge. Yeah, absolutely.
And is that for the courses that are included in your top 6, or is that across the board?
Correct. We will only apply these policies for courses that we need to pull into your average.
Gotcha.
So, I mean, in engineering, as an example, they have the most required courses. There's 5 required courses out of 6. So you've got 2 math, chemistry, physics, English. So you only have 1 freebie. Whereas, in the Faculty of Arts, for many of our programs, for example, English for you is the only required course. So then, you have a wide range of courses. Your next best 5 will be what we pull in.
Right. Going back to what you said earlier about, say, maybe math competitions or tests you could do if you are applying to the Faculty of Math, Engineering, or Computer Science, do the scores on these math tests matter, or these contests, or is it purely just participation based?
Yeah, I guess the best way to say it is you can only benefit. Right. It will never be used against you, because you could be the top student, just have a bad day. It's one test, one day, and we're very aware of that. However, using the Euclid Math Contest as an example, so the Euclid Math Contest, for students that are really into math, they'll know what that is.
Right.
It is full solution and final answer, 10 questions, if I remember correctly. And there's very few students who score near perfect on that. Some years there's no one that gets a perfect score, for example. And so if you are one of the top students out of 18,000 students who write that, I'm going on memory here, that tells us that you have a strong background in math, because these questions get progressively harder. So you could get a bonus for doing well on that contest, and there's other contests like that. But if you have a rough day, it doesn't affect you. There's no reduction. It's just that your admission score will stay the way it is. Right. So you can see it as an extra thing to put on your admission information form.
Right.
So if you haven't written the contest, you still might get the same or a better score, but it's based on other things.
Right.
So really, it is a relevant indicator of ability.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's too such a good coming from someone who never wrote them, but also never planned on studying math. Good exposure even to just how math can be at university, because I think it's a little bit different than like the plug and chug of high school math. Like it's way more abstract.
They actually look at that all the time, and our Center for Education in Math Computing that runs the contests, and again, these are run across Canada. The reason we do this is not for admission. In fact, these contests, I think, start in grade 4, and the math involvement. We work with schools across Canada and across the world because our faculty of math is the largest in the world, and they're really about increasing math literacy. So all of the indication from the research is that students who engage in doing these contests, the preparation, the activity of doing that, actually is preparing you for first year studies. Kind of like we said earlier about like getting involved in extracurriculars or part-time work. They do better in first year typically. Because they've been exercising that math muscle, not just doing the minimum in the classroom, but doing that extra stuff, pushing themselves, stretching a little bit. So when they get into the classroom at university, those problem solving abilities are a little bit more finely honed, I guess.
Big question coming to you. Adjustment factors. I hear it all the time when we get to schools and students are asked us, is my school listed on the adjustment factor? What is the adjustment factor? Could you just talk about it generally and kind of go into it a little bit?
So the adjustment factor, I think the key point is that it is unique to the Faculty of Engineering. So there is no adjustment factor outside of engineering. One of the reasons that they have it in engineering, and it goes back to when we started as a university, we were the first to combine co-op with engineering education, is that, again, I said we have 5 required courses. So whether you're from Ontario, British Columbia, or India, all students coming in are almost taking the exact same courses. So statistically, there's more relevance there. So the idea was to look at students who are coming into engineering and compare their entering average to their average at the end of first year to see, are we making good decisions? Are students being successful? And they update that data every year based on what we have. Now, if there's not enough students coming from a school to be statistically relevant, there won't be a score applied. They just get the average score. But again, over the years, most of our students are from Ontario, or our majority of students. We do have a lot of information. So in fact, if you're on the list, it means we've admitted, even if you have what you would perceive as a lower score, let's say relative to the list itself, that means we're actually taking a whole bunch of students from your school. Really what that list has empowered, I guess, on a positive side, is that I mentioned like the diploma mills and schools with really questionable practices. Those schools are very clear. And so it helps us to ensure that we're not giving away a spot to a student with a 98 average who is going to drop 30-40% because their actual grade probably should have been in the 70s. So again, it's a mathematical benchmark, I guess you could say, to help guide the decisions. So that's my own explanation. There's a lot online. So if you have questions, I encourage people to reach out to engineering or just visit our website. There's more there. But I would say that the students who are usually, and parents who are the most worried about it, I would say are the ones that need to be least worried about it. Because it's actually there to protect the integrity of the process.
Exactly. I think, again, that key takeaway that you said is that if your school is on the list, assuming it's a public school or whatever, it's not one of these more questionable schools, it means we've literally admitted enough students that we can run data on it. So that's actually great news.
And if you're not on the list, it doesn't mean we're not taking students.
Exactly.
It just could mean that the data is not statistically relevant. And the other thing, I always get the question, like, so do you have a list of all the questionable schools? And not really in the way that people are saying that, because that list is changing all the time. Schools change their name, they get shut down, they reopen, things like that. Again, we have general knowledge on these things, and we have a variety of tools in our tool belt, if you will, throughout admissions. So the adjustment factor is just one specific thing connected to engineering, but admissions departments at Canadian universities have a variety of ways to check for the integrity of the grades that we're receiving, and to make sure that students are deserving and earning those spots.
Exactly.
Some quick rapid fire questions for you. How many programs can you apply to at the University of Waterloo?
Yeah, so you can apply to up to 3. and you will get 3 distinct decisions so each application is its own unique assessment and decision. If you're applying through the Ontario University Application Centre, which you are if you're applying to Waterloo, you get 3 automatically, and then you can add additional choices. But we max out at 3 at our university.
Gotcha. And any additional choices, that's like a fee?
Yeah, I think it's $50
Okay.
per additional choice.
Perfect.
And again, there's different fees depending on whether you're international or domestic, and why is that, or even out of province. It's because the Ontario grades come electronically and are just very simple to assess in a sense.
Right.
Whereas the systems outside of Ontario and globally, we actually assess those applications individually. So we have a team of incredible admission officers that do that work.
Right.
So it's just more labor intensive, and we just need to make sure we have the appropriate resources to look after that.
And you mentioned you can apply to 3 programs max, but how many can you apply to at engineering?
Only 1 for engineering. I think there's the exception, if I'm remembering correctly, and Kristin, maybe you will know this as well, is architecture is a part of engineering technically,
Yes.
but because it's the School of Architecture and it's competing at there's a limited number of schools of architecture. We understand that a student may want to apply to that. And I'd say the closest, most common one is architectural engineering or civil. They'll allow 2 applications in that case, but generally 1 application engineering.
Perfect. And lastly, before we get to our student questions, any personal advice you have for prospective students wanting to come to Waterloo?
It sounds like a parent thing to say or a cheesy thing to say, but really, you've already started the work on this since especially grade 11. So it is to be prepared, manage your time well, and get the best grades you can. And also, if you're applying to a program that looks beyond grades, do things outside the classroom, get involved in a way that is meaningful to you. Because again, this isn't about putting a list on a supplementary form.
Yeah, exactly.
If you get interested and involved in a variety of things, I guarantee we have those things when you get to university. I think we have over 200 clubs and activities you can join. So whatever you have at your high school, there's a lot more at university. So it's also a great way to get to know people and ensure you have a fun experience. You sometimes hear that I think Waterloo is a serious place. And yes, we have a lot of really competitive students that are coming in. But ultimately, as a student, it's up to you to get involved. And we have all the activities ready to go there. And there's a lot to do around here and a lot of fun things. So again, it connects back to get involved, work hard, and just be authentic. That's the other thing. We know times are changing. We know we've got ChatGPT and other things. When you're doing your admission application, whatever it looks like at the time you're applying, we just ask that you just be authentic, answer truthfully, and again, apply to the universities you're interested, study the things that you're excited about, and don't get fixated on that end career, because all the research indicates that most people end up in a job that they didn't know about at the time that they applied to university.
Yeah, without a doubt.
So if you study something that you like, that simply, the work will follow. And it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's fine arts, history, English, environment, health, or engineering. Our students are graduating, they're getting good jobs across all faculties and all programs. But to get through university and to have a great time and to get the good grades, you have to study something that you like.
Yeah.
So you're saying when you did your arts degree, you didn't have an end goal of becoming the associate registrar of admissions?
That is correct. I had no idea that this was a discipline unto itself.
That's fair.
And actually, I think that's true. If you're sitting with your family at the next get together, ask all the adults that are working professionals if they're doing the job they thought they were going to do when they were 17 years old.
Exactly.
And I'll bet you very few will actually say that that's the case.
Way more lawyers, teachers, and doctors than we ever thought could possibly exist. I would hazard to guess.
That is correct.
Exactly.
Yes.
Well, I'll kick it away with some student questions.
Sure. So we pulled some off Reddit, a very popular online forum, slightly less reputable, but definitely where we get most of our interesting questions.
Yeah.
So there was some confusion online about, will you be asked to send an official transcript even after, say, uploading an unofficial one to after you've applied? Or how do transcripts really work?
Yeah. So again, Ontario grades come directly from the schools, so students don't have to send us a transcript unless you maybe already graduated. There's always cases where the rules don't apply because we're dealing with so many students. And there's some other systems where we get grades electronically. So if your grades are coming electronically, great. But whether it's in paper or digital form, if you receive an offer, you will need to send us your final grades directly from the source. And of course, that's about integrity of the process. So we may make a decision on self-reported grades or uploaded grades or transcripts, but we will verify that at the end of the day to make sure that, again, there's integrity to our process.
Yeah. And last question for you. Can you take a few extra terms in sort of your engineering program to complete a minor, and would this be beneficial?
I don't actually know the answer with certainty to that. I think it's rare because engineering is a regulated profession across the entire country. Right. So whether you go to Waterloo or Lakehead or Carleton, it doesn't matter. They're all accredited by the same engineering body.
Right.
And the courses are pretty rigid that you need to take. And that's why you have 5 required courses. You will be taking chemistry, physics, math again when you come to university, and English as well. So I believe in a degree that consists of about 40 courses, you have only a handful of courses typically that are what we call electives, meaning you can choose whatever you want. So students will take really interesting courses in completely different things, but they don't have a lot of room to earn a minor or a specialization. And that's just the reality of engineering. And actually, if I can, I'd relate that to when you're looking at what you want to study. An important thing to think about is how important is it for you to have that flexibility and to pursue different things. So if your absolute passion is to be an engineer, great, go into engineering. And again, we have one of the top collections of programs in the world. But if you're really not sure and you really want to explore different things when you come to university, engineering is not the best area for that. Right. And so it's a different way to look at your education. So for example, if you're looking at software engineering versus computer science, they're training you for the same jobs essentially. But computer science in its structure has more flexibility to take other courses. Right. So definitely do your homework if you're looking at different programs, and you should have a sense of how important it is to you to be able to pursue different things.
The last question that I see a lot of, and we see on Reddit, there's always like interesting, I'll call them creative ways to access certain programs through what I'll call back doors. So like if I really want to get into software engineering, I might apply to environmental, and so there's all these creative ways to get there. Do you mind just speaking a little bit to the backdoor theory, if you will?
Yeah, so we have a very high retention rate, meaning that the vast majority of students who come to Waterloo graduate from Waterloo. So not many students are failing out. And students do switch programs, but again, typically, and in the most competitive areas, it's over 90% most years that are graduating successfully. So that just means there's not a lot of spaces opening up. This is a 4 or 5 year commitment that you're making. Right. That's going to set up, the next major chunk of your life. So if you don't get into the program you want, we say with heartfelt sincerity, do not come here in another program hoping that you're going to be able to transfer over. If you get an alternate offer, which does happen, you should still only accept it if you're really excited about it. Right. And if you can see yourself graduating from that program, or it's closely related. So it does happen that students transfer into the program they didn't get into. But again, it's not the norm, and it's not something that you should count on. So computer science is a good example. If you don't get into computer science at Waterloo and you get in somewhere else, I'd encourage you to accept that offer to something else, unless the other program at Waterloo is still exciting to you and a great option. We also in our offers try to give students an indication of what is possible. So there are programs where we do know exactly what you need to do. So it may be that you get an alternate offer and we say, well, if you get this average in first year, you will be able to transfer. So if there's a path that's pretty clear, we will share it proactively with students.
Exactly.
Typically, we're saying the opposite, though. We're saying, you didn't get in here, here's another offer, if that happens. And we're very clear to say only accept this if you want to graduate in this program.
And I think that retention piece you speak on is something we'll cover in future podcast episodes, because the fact that retention is so high, I think the perception of it's so hard to get into University of Waterloo, and then when you're there, it's like this crazy atmosphere.
Yeah.
When in reality, if that many students are sticking around, that's telling you it's not this type of cutthroat area, if you will, in which we'll touch on like student success and whatnot. But I think it's a pretty cool lead in to what we'll talk about up and coming. That students are coming and they're staying, which is always a good start.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Thanks, André, for joining us today on our podcast. For the students, for future podcasts that we have going on, please visit our Hello Warrior podcast webpage to submit any questions that you have and then be featured on our podcast. You could win some pretty cool swag like the sweater I'm wearing today. So please get those questions in and then you can be featured on our podcast. But I think that's it for me. We're signing off. We'll see you soon, Future Warriors.
Thanks.